In the third week of November, in the year 1895, a dense yellow fog settled down upon London. From the Monday to the Thursday, I doubt whether it was ever possible, from our windows in Baker Street, to see the loom of the opposite houses. The first day Holmes had spent in cross-indexing his huge book of references. Time, after pushing back our chairs from breakfast, we saw the greasy, heavy brown swirl still drifting past us, and condensing in oily drops upon the window panes. My comrade's impatient and active nature could endure this drab existence no longer. "Nothing of interest in the paper, Watson?" he said. I was aware that by anything of interest, Holmes meant anything of criminal interest. There was the news of a revolution, of a possible war, and of an impending change of government, but these did not come within the horizon of my companion. I could see nothing recorded in the shape of crime which was not commonplace and futile. "Look out this window, Watson. See how the figures loom up, are dimly seen, and then blend once more into the cloud bank. The thief or the murderer could roam London on such a day as the tiger does the jungle, unseen until he pounces, and then evident only to his victim. There have," said I, "been numerous petty thefts." Holmes snorted his contempt. "My brother Mycroft is coming round." "Why not?" I asked. "Why not? It is as if you met a tram-car coming down a country lane. Mycroft has his rails, and he runs on them. His Pall Mall lodgings, the Diogenes Club, Whitehall, that is his cycle. Once, and only once, has he been here. What upheaval can possibly have derailed him? Does he not explain?" Holmes handed me his brother's telegram. "Cadogan West. I've heard the name. It recalls nothing to my mind, but that Mycroft should break out in this erratic fashion. A planet might as well leave its orbit. By the way, do you know what Mycroft is?" I had some vague recollection of an explanation at the time of the adventure of the Greek interpreter. "You told me that he had some small office under the British government." Holmes chuckled. Yes, here he is, sure enough. Cadogan West was the young man who was found dead on the Underground on Tuesday morning." Holmes sat up at attention, his pipe halfway to his lips. "This must be serious, Watson. A death which has caused my brother to alter his habits can be no ordinary one. What in the world can he have to do with it? The case was featureless, as I remember it." The young man had apparently fallen out of the train and killed himself. He had not been robbed, and there was no particular reason to suspect violence. Is that not so? "There has been an inquest," said I, "and a good many fresh facts have come out. Looked at more closely, I should certainly say that it was a curious case." "Judging by its effects upon my brother, I should think it must be a most extraordinary one." He snuggled down in his armchair. "There we have it at last, Watson. British government, Woolwich, Arsenal, technical papers, brother Mycroft. The chain is complete, but here he comes, if I am not mistaken, to speak for himself." A moment later the tall and portly form of Mycroft Holmes was ushered into the room. At his heels came our old friend Lestrade of Scotland Yard, thin and austere. Mycroft Holmes struggled out of his overcoat and subsided into an armchair. "A very singular one. That is objection number one. Objection number two. We will suppose that he reaches London and sees the foreign agent. He must bring back the papers before morning, or the loss will be discovered. He took away 10. Only 7 were in his pocket. What had become of the other 3? He certainly would not leave them of his own free will. Then again, where is the price of his treason? One would have expected to find a large sum of money in his pocket." "It seems to me perfectly clear," said Lestrade. "I have no doubt at all as to what occurred. He took the papers to sell them. He saw the agent. They could not agree as to price. He started home again, but the agent went with him. In the train, the agent murdered him, took the more essential papers, and threw his body from the carriage. That would account for everything, would it not? Why had he no ticket? The ticket would have shown which station was nearest the agent's house. Therefore he took it from the murdered man's pocket. "Good, Lestrade, very good," said Holmes. "Your theory holds together, but if this is true, then the case is at an end. On the other hand, the traitor is dead. On the other, the plans of the Bruce-Partington submarine are presumably already on the continent. What is there for us to do?" "To act, Sherlock, to act!" cried Mycroft, springing to his feet. "All my instincts are against this explanation. Use your powers. Go to the scene of the crime. See the people concerned. Leave no stone unturned. In all your career you have never had so great a chance of serving your country." "Well, well," said Holmes, shrugging his shoulders. "Come, Watson, and you, Lestrade, could you favour us with your company for an hour or two? We will begin our investigation by a visit to Aldgate station. Goodbye, Mycroft. I shall let you have a report before evening, but I warn you in advance that you have little to expect." An hour later, Holmes, Lestrade and I stood upon the Underground Railroad at the point where it emerges from the tunnel immediately before Aldgate station. "This is where the young man's body lay," said he, indicating a spot about 3 feet from the metals. "It could not have fallen from above, for these, as you see, are all blank walls. Therefore it could only have come from a train, and that train, so far as we can trace it, must have passed about midnight on Monday." "Have the carriages been examined for any sign of violence?" "There are no such signs, and no ticket has been found." "No record of a door being found open?" "None." "We've had some fresh evidence this morning," said Lestrade. "A passenger who passed Aldgate in an ordinary metropolitan train about 11:40 on Monday night declares that he heard a heavy thud, as of a body striking the line, just before the train reached the station. There was dense fog, however, and nothing could be seen. He made no report of it at the time." "Why, whatever is the matter with Mr. Holmes?" My friend was standing with an expression of strained intensity upon his face, staring at the railway metals where they curved out of the tunnel. "As it happens, it was not the carriages which I desired to examine. Watson, we have done all we can here. We need not trouble you any further, Mr. Lestrade. I think our investigations must now carry us to Woolwich." At London Bridge, Holmes wrote a telegram to his brother, which he handed to me before dispatching it. "We certainly owe Brother Mycroft a debt for having introduced us to what promises to be a really very remarkable case." His eager face still wore that expression of intense and high-strung energy, which showed me that some novel and suggestive circumstance had opened up a stimulating line of thought. "Exactly. We could not explain the absence of a ticket. This would explain it. Everything fits together. But suppose it were so, we are still as far as ever from unravelling the mystery of his death. Indeed, it becomes not simpler, but stranger, perhaps," said Holmes thoughtfully, "perhaps." He relapsed into a silent reverie, which lasted until the slow train drew up at last in Woolwich station. There he called a cab and drew Mycroft's paper from his pocket. "Sir James died this morning." "Good heavens!" cried Holmes in amazement. "How did he die?" "Perhaps you would care to step in, sir, and see his brother, Colonel Valentine?" "Yes, we had best do so." We were ushered into a dim-lit drawing-room, where an instant later we were joined by a very tall, handsome, light-bearded man of 50, the younger brother of the dead scientist. His wild eyes, stained cheeks, and unkempt hair all spoke of the sudden blow which had fallen upon the household. The old lady was too dazed with grief to be of any use to us. But at her side was a white-faced young lady who introduced herself as Miss Violet Westbury, the fiancée of the dead man and the last to see him upon that fatal night. "I cannot explain it, Mr. Holmes," she said. "Yes," she said at last. "I had a feeling that there was something on his mind." "For long?" "Only for the last week or so. He was thoughtful and worried. Once I pressed him about it. He admitted that there was something, and that it was concerned with his official life. "It is too serious for me to speak about, even to you," said he. I could get nothing more. Holmes looked grave. "Go on, Miss Westbury. Even if it seems to tell against him, go on. We cannot say what it may lead to." "Indeed, I have nothing more to tell. Once or twice it seemed to me that he was on the point of telling me something. He spoke one evening of the importance of the secret, and I have some recollection that he said that no doubt foreign spies would pay a great deal to have it." My friend's face grew graver still. "Come, Watson," said he, "our ways lie elsewhere. Our next station must be the office from which the papers were taken. It was black enough before against this young man, but our inquiries make it blacker," he remarked as the cab lumbered off. "His coming marriage gives a motive for the crime. It is all very bad. But surely Holmes' character goes for something. Then again, why should he leave the girl in the street and dart away to commit a felony?" "Exactly. There are certainly objections. There was a laurel bush outside the window, and several of the branches bore signs of having been twisted or snapped." He examined them carefully with his lens, and then some dim and vague marks upon the earth beneath. "The indications are ruined by 3 days' delay. They may mean something or nothing." The clerk in the ticket office was able to say with confidence that he saw Cadogan West, whom he knew well by sight, upon the Monday night, and that he went to London by the 8:15 to London Bridge. A reference to the timetable showed that the 8:15 was the first train which it was possible for West to take after he had left the lady about 7:30. "Let us reconstruct, Watson," said Holmes after half an hour of silence. "I am not aware that in all our joint researches we have ever had a case which was more difficult to get at. Every fresh advance which we make only reveals a fresh ridge beyond. And yet we have surely made some appreciable progress. The effect of our inquiries at Woolwich has in the main been against young Cadogan West, but the indications at the window would lend themselves to a more favourable hypothesis. He followed the man, reached the window, saw the abstraction of the documents, and pursued the thief. One could imagine that under such circumstances the first act of young Cadogan West would be to seize the villain and raise the alarm. Why did he not do so? Could it have been an official superior who took the papers? That would explain West's conduct. Or could the chief have given West the slip in the fog, and West started at once to London to head him off from his own rooms, presuming that he knew where the rooms were? The call must have been very pressing, since he left his girl standing in the fog and made no effort to communicate with her. Our scent runs cold here, and there is a vast gap between either hypothesis and the laying of West's body, with 7 papers in his pocket, on the roof of a metropolitan train. "I'm afraid," said Holmes, smiling, "that all the Queen's horses and all the Queen's men cannot avail in this matter." "Well, well," said he presently, with an exclamation of satisfaction, "things are turning a little in our direction at last." Why, Watson, I do honestly believe that we are going to pull it off after all. Now, it must be evident to you, Watson, that this young man's body was placed on the roof of the train. If you examine the roofs, you will find that they are slightly rounded, and there is no railing round them. Therefore, we can say for certain that young Cadogan West was placed on it. You are aware that the underground runs clear of tunnels at some points in the West End. I had a vague memory that, as I have travelled by it, I have occasionally seen windows just above my head. Now suppose that a train halted under such a window. Would there be any difficulty in laying a body upon the roof? It seems most improbable. We must fall back upon the old axiom that when all other contingencies fail, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. When I found that the leading international agent, who had just left London, lived in a row of houses which abutted upon the underground, I was so pleased that you were a little astonished at my sudden frivolity. I began my operations at Gloucester Road Station, where a very helpful official walked me along the track and allowed me to satisfy myself not only that the back stair windows of Caulfield Gardens open on the line, but the even more essential fact that, owing to the intersection of one of the larger railways, the underground trains are frequently held motionless for some minutes at that very spot. Splendid, Holmes! You have got it. So far, Watson. Well, having seen the back of Caulfield Gardens, I visited the front and satisfied myself that the bird was indeed flown. Caulfield Gardens was one of those lines of flat-faced, pillared and porticoed houses which are so prominent a product of the middle Victorian epoch in the West End of London. Holmes had lit his lantern and flashed it upon the massive door. "Give me a hand, Watson, and I'll do the same for you." As its soft rhythm died away, Holmes set to work upon the lower door. Holmes led the way up the curving, uncarpeted stair. His little fan of yellow light shone upon a low window. "Hello, Watson, what is this? There can be no doubt that it is a blood mark." The very next train roared from the tunnel as before, but slowed in the open, and then, with a creaking of brakes, pulled up immediately beneath us. What do you think of it, Watson? A masterpiece. From the moment that I conceived the idea of the body being upon the roof, which surely was not a very abstruse one, all the rest was inevitable. We had ascended the kitchen stair and entered the suite of rooms upon the first floor. The remaining room appeared more promising, and my companion settled down to a systematic examination. It was a small tin cash-box which stood upon the writing desk. Several rolls of paper were within, covered with figures and calculations, without any note to show to what they referred. "What's this, Watson, eh? What's this? Record of a series of messages in the advertisements of a paper. A fairly complete record, Watson, if we could only get at the man at the other end." He sat lost in thought, tapping his fingers on the table. "Well, perhaps it won't be so difficult after all." "There is nothing more to be done here, Watson. I think we might drive round to the offices of the Daily Telegraph, and so bring a good day's work to a conclusion." Mycroft, Holmes and Lestrade had come round by appointment after breakfast next day, and Sherlock Holmes had recounted to them our proceedings of the day before. "We can't do these things in the force, Mr. Holmes," said he. "No wonder you get results that are beyond us. But some of these days you'll go too far, and you'll find yourself and your friend in trouble. For England, home and beauty, eh, Watson? Martyrs on the altar of our country." But what do you think of it, Mycroft? Excellent, Sherlock, admirable. But what use will you make of it? Holmes picked up the Daily Telegraph, which lay upon the table. "If he answers that, we've got him. That was my idea when I put it in. I think if you could both make it convenient to come with us about 8 o'clock to Caulfield Gardens, we might possibly get a little nearer to a solution." One of the most remarkable characteristics of Sherlock Holmes was his power of throwing his brain out of action and switching all his thoughts onto lighter things whenever he had convinced himself that he could no longer work to advantage. For my own part, I had none of this power of detachment, and the day in consequence appeared to be interminable. The great national importance of the issue, the suspense in high quarters, the direct nature of the experiment which we were trying, all combined to work upon my nerve. The area door of Oberstein's house had been left open the night before, and it was necessary for me, as Mycroft Holmes absolutely and indignantly declined to climb the railings, to pass in and open the hall door. By 9 o'clock we were all seated in the study, waiting patiently for our man. Holmes sat silent and composed, his eyelids half shut, but every sense on the alert. "This way," we heard him say, and a moment later our man stood before us. Holmes had followed him closely, and as the man turned, with a cry of surprise and alarm, he caught him by the collar and threw him back into the room. Before our prisoner had recovered his balance, the door was shut, and Holmes standing with his back against it. The man glared round him, staggered, and fell senseless upon the floor. "I came here to visit Mr. Oberstein. Everything is known, Colonel Walter," said Holmes. "How an Englishman could behave in such a manner is beyond my comprehension. But your whole correspondence and relations with Oberstein are within our knowledge. So also are the circumstances connected with the death of young Cadogan West." The man groaned and sank his face in his hands. "Can you not make reparation? It would ease your conscience, and possibly your punishment." "What reparation can I make? Where is Oberstein with the papers?" "I do not know." "Did he give you no address?" "He said that letters to the Hôtel du Louvre, Paris, would eventually reach him." "Then reparation is still within your power," said Sherlock Holmes. "I shall be very much surprised if it does not fetch our man." As to Holmes, he returned refreshed to his monograph upon the polyphonic motets of Lassus, which has since been printed for private circulation, and is said by experts to be the last word upon the subject. Some weeks afterwards I learned incidentally that my friend spent a day at Windsor, whence he returned with a remarkably fine emerald tie-pin.
Thank you for watching this video. Please like, share and subscribe to the channel to see the latest videos. Thank you.